The studio buzzed with anticipation. Governor JB Pritzker had just stepped in, clearly ready to draw attention. Across from him sat Karoline Leavitt, posture straight, eyes focused, with a faint smirk suggesting she was prepared for a challenge. The segment was meant to focus on economic policies, but it was obvious to anyone paying attention that this exchange was about to get personal. From the opening moments, Pritzker went off script, leaning forward. His tone carried a clear edge of condescension. "You're nothing more than Trump's spoiled spokesperson," he said, letting the words hang like a dare. The audience reacted. Some gasped, others laughed awkwardly, while a few leaned in, eager to see what would follow. Karoline didn't flinch. She tilted her head slightly, as though deciding whether the comment was even worth a response. Her composed reaction only made Pritzker seem more eager for a reaction. This wasn't a casual remark. It was deliberate. By labeling her as spoiled, Pritzker was attempting to undermine her political credibility before the discussion even began. But Karoline isn't the type to let such comments pass. If anything, remarks like that tend to fuel her. The camera zoomed in, catching every detail of her expression. She smiled, not out of amusement, but the kind of smile that signals someone already knows exactly how they are going to respond. And it seemed she wasn't just going to defend herself. She was prepared to shift the entire narrative. Viewers could sense it. You know that point in a political debate where you realize one side is about to take control? This felt like that moment. But it raises a question. When a politician chooses to go personal instead of sticking to policy, does it show confidence, or does it mean they've already lost the argument? Karoline took a measured breath, leaned in, and began speaking. That's when the atmosphere changed. Her voice was steady, but carried a sharp edge, the kind that makes listeners focus. "Governor, if I'm spoiled, it's because I grew up in a country built on hard work, accountability, and the freedom to speak openly, principles you seem less willing to defend lately." The audience reacted immediately. Some applauded, others laughed in disbelief, and the camera caught Pritzker shifting in his seat. Karoline didn't simply deflect. She reframed his jab into a critique of his record, maintaining eye contact. She continued, "I didn't inherit my position, and I didn't purchase my influence. Everything I say and every point I argue comes from merit, not from relying on political connections or inflated state budgets." That statement landed heavily. Pritzker's expression tightened. He was used to controlling the conversation, but now he was facing someone willing to respond with more force than he had started with. Karoline's voice gained energy. "You call me Trump's spokesperson. Fine. At least I speak for someone who prioritizes the American people. Can you truly say the same about your administration? Can you look into that camera and tell viewers that your record isn't defined by overspending, increasing crime, and political favoritism?" The studio fell silent. This was more than a rebuttal. It was a direct challenge to his leadership. Pritzker's eyes shifted toward the moderator, as though hoping to move on. But the moment had already taken hold, and Karoline wasn't stepping back. Here's something to consider. In a political confrontation, do you value the person who stays composed under attack, or the one who returns fire twice as strong? At this point, Karoline wasn't merely defending herself. She was pushing for a decisive win. She leaned in slightly, hands relaxed on the table, eyes locked on Pritzker like a hawk focused on its target. "Governor, the problem isn't that you dislike my tone. It's that you can't handle the truth when it's delivered without apology." The moderator attempted to interject, but Karoline pressed on. Her words came with a deliberate rhythm. Each one weighted. "Illinois is buried in debt. Families are leaving in record numbers. Crime in Chicago is spiraling. And your answer? More taxes, more spending, more political theater. Call me whatever you want, Governor, but you can't outrun the facts." The audience remained silent, leaning forward in anticipation. The tension felt like the air before a storm. Pritzker's expression hardened before he finally replied, "I'm not here to take lectures from someone who's never held office." Karoline cut in instantly, "And I'm not here to take moral lessons from someone who's held power for years and still can't put their own house in order." The crowd erupted. Applause, shouts, even a few gasps. The moderator raised a hand in a bid to regain control. But it was obvious Karoline had seized the moment, turning toward the camera. Her voice stayed even but carried an unmistakable edge. "People watching at home, ask yourselves this. Who earned your trust? Someone who spent decades making excuses, or someone willing to speak hard truths, even when it unsettles the establishment?" The question lingered that IT wasn't mere rhetoric. It was a direct challenge to Pritzker, and the viewers still buying into his message. Pritzker shifted in his chair, visibly unsettled. His eyes flicked toward production crew, perhaps hoping for a break. But the camera light stayed on. Karoline didn't grin or revel in the moment. She simply let the silence carry, and in that pause, it was clear. The momentum had swung entirely in her direction. The moderator finally wedged in a transition. But Pritzker wasn't ready to let go. Leaning forward, he tried to retake control. Karoline, you can stand here and recite talking points all night. But leadership is about governing, not grandstanding, he said, with a blend of irritation and condescension. Karoline didn't flinch. She adjusted her microphone slightly, almost a signal she was ready to make things even more uncomfortable for him. Governor, if this is your definition of governing, it explains why Illinois tops the charts for residents moving out. You've taxed working families to the limit. You've let crime escalate. You watch businesses close while congratulating yourself on progress. The moderator attempted to shift topics again, but the energy in the room said otherwise. The audience wanted more. Karoline continued, her voice sharp yet measured. You know what Illinois residents call this? They call it a slow-motion disaster, and they deserve more than excuses dressed up as sound bites. The crowd reacted again, some nodding, some applauding. Pritzker shot back. It's easy to criticize when you've never had to balance a budget or run a state. Here's something to consider. In a political confrontation, do you value the person who stays composed under attack, or the one who returns fire twice as strong? At this point, Karoline wasn't merely defending herself. She was pushing for a decisive win. She leaned in slightly, hands relaxed on the table, eyes locked on Pritzker like a hawk focused on its target. Governor, the problem isn't that you dislike my tone. It's that you can't handle the truth when it's delivered without apology. The moderator attempted to interject, but Karoline pressed on. Her words came with a deliberate rhythm. Each one weighted. Illinois is buried in debt. Families are leaving in record numbers. Crime in Chicago is spiraling. And your answer? More taxes, more spending, more political theater. Call me whatever you want, Governor, but you can't outrun the facts. The audience remained silent, leaning forward in anticipation. The tension felt like the air before a stormed up. Pritzker's expression hardened before he finally replied. I'm not here to take lectures from someone who's never held office. Karoline cut in instantly. And I'm not here to take moral lessons from someone who's held power for years and still can't put their own house in order. The crowd erupted. Applause, shouts, even a few gasps. The moderator raised a hand in a bid to regain control. But it was obvious Karoline had seized the moment, turning toward the camera. Her voice stayed even but carried an unmistakable edge. People watching at home, ask yourselves this. Who earns your trust? Someone who spent decades making excuses, or someone willing to speak hard truths, even when it unsettles the establishment? The question lingered that IT wasn't mere rhetoric. It was a direct challenge to Pritzker, and the viewers still buying into his message. Pritzker shifted in his chair, visibly unsettled. His eyes flicked toward production crew, perhaps hoping for a break. But the camera light stayed on. Karoline didn't grin or revel in the moment. She simply let the silence carry, and in that pause, it was clear. The momentum had swung entirely in her direction. The moderator finally wedged in a transition. But Pritzker wasn't ready to let go. Leaning forward, he tried to retake control. Karoline, you can stand here and recite talking points all night. But leadership is about governing, not grandstanding, he said, with a blend of irritation and condescension. Karoline didn't flinch. She adjusted her microphone slightly, almost a signal she was ready to make things even more uncomfortable for him. Governor, if this is your definition of governing, it explains why Illinois tops the charts for residents moving out. You've taxed working families to the limit. You've let crime escalate. You watch businesses close while congratulating yourself on progress. The moderator attempted to shift topics again, but the energy in the room said otherwise. The audience wanted more. Karoline continued, her voice sharp yet measured. You know what Illinois residents call this? They call it a slow-motion disaster. And they deserve more than excuses dressed up as sound bites. The crowd reacted again, some nodding, some applauding. Pritzker shot back. It's easy to criticize when you've never had to balance a budget or run a state. Karoline didn't pause. And yet, Governor, despite all your experience, Illinois' budget is still in shambles. The pension system is barely surviving, and corruption scandals keep piling up. Experience means little if the results are failure. That hit hard. Pritzker glanced away for just a moment, long enough for the cameras to catch it. Karoline turned toward the audience and viewers at home. So I'll ask, how many more years can Illinois keep going like this? How long before so-called leadership admits the excuses have run out? Her words weren't just aimed at Pritzker. They were directed at the political establishment as a whole, and everyone in the room sensed it. Pritzker adjusted his tie, a small, telling gesture that he tried to steady himself, speaking in a tone meant to sound measured but edged with disdain. Karoline, you're speaking like a campaign flyer, not someone grounded in reality. Illinois has faced unprecedented challenges, and unlike you, I've been in the trenches making tough calls. Karoline tilted her head, the hint of a smile crossing her face, not a friendly one, but the kind that says, I was waiting for you to go there. Tough calls, Governor? Is that what you call raising taxes while driving away the very people who pay them? Is that what you call ignoring surging crime rates in Chicago while lecturing the rest of the country about values? Pritzker tried to interrupt. Crime is a complex. No, Governor, Karoline cut in sharply. Crime is destroying communities, and you've been too busy polishing your national image to address it. Her words sliced through his. The audience stirred, some gasping, others murmuring agreement. Karoline leaned forward, voice low but unshakably firm. Here's the truth. Illinois is losing jobs, losing residents, and losing hope. And under your watch, the future is circling the drain. You can wrap it in talking points, but the people living it aren't fooled. Pritzker's jaw tightened. He started to respond, but Karoline didn't give him the chance. And before you tell me I don't understand because I haven't sat in your chair, maybe that's a problem. Maybe the people of Illinois need someone who hasn't been part of the same broken system that's failed them for decades. The moderator glanced between them, unsure whether to intervene or let it play out. Karoline looked straight into the camera, bypassing Pritzker entirely. Folks at home, do you feel safer? Do you feel more secure financially? Do you believe Illinois is headed in the right direction? Because if you don't, maybe it's time to stop accepting excuses from leaders who've run out of answers. It landed like a gut punch, not just for Pritzker, but for any politician watching. Pritzker tried to recover, but the pause before his response was just long enough for the audience to sense the shift. That silence, heavy and uncomfortable, was like blood in the water, and Karoline wasn't about to let it go. Governor, she said, voice sharp and precise, you're quick to lecture me about experience. But experience doesn't equal competence, that if it did, Illinois wouldn't be a case study in what happens when politicians put themselves ahead of their constituents. The governor's lips tightened, but Karoline pressed on. You've had years, billions in taxpayer dollars, and a state rich in talent and resources. Yet under your leadership, Illinois ranks among the worst for fiscal health. Residents are leaving in record numbers. And your solution? Blame everyone else. Pritzker shifted, preparing to respond, but she cut in cleanly. And let's talk about the people you've lost, the families who moved away because their kids couldn't get a good education in a safe neighborhood. You call that progress? A ripple went through the crowd. Even the moderator leaned in. Pritzker finally spoke. It's easy to point fingers when you don't understand the complexities. Complexities, Karoline repeated. Governor, you use that word like it's a shield. But there's nothing complex about protecting citizens, keeping streets safe, and ensuring working families can thrive. You don't need a policy memo to know when a state is failing. You just need to listen to the people living there. The tension in the room was electric. Karoline turned back to the audience, her tone conversational but still razor-sharp. Here's the thing. Leadership isn't about holding a title. It's about producing results. And if you can't, you step aside for someone who can. The people of Illinois deserve more than excuses wrapped in political doublespeak. For a moment, the camera caught Pritzker's face, not anger, but something worse for a politician, the look of someone realizing there was no safe answer. The studio air felt heavy, the audience collectively holding its breath, aware they were witnessing a moment they wouldn't soon forget. Pritzker straightened his tie, his practiced smile fading into something more guarded. Let me be clear, he began, leaning toward the microphone. Illinois has faced challenges, yes, but under my leadership. Karoline cut in, her tone steady but uncompromising. Challenges, Governor? What you call challenges are the direct result of failed decisions, rising crime rates, businesses fleeing, and taxes so high they are practically eviction notices for middle-class families. That's not bad luck. That's bad leadership. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Even the less politically engaged could sense a momentum shift up. Pritzker's attempt to steer the conversation toward safer ground had been stopped cold. She kept her eyes locked on him, each word deliberate. You talk about progress, but what does progress mean to a single mother in Chicago who can't let her kids play outside after dark? What does progress mean to a small business owner drowning in regulations while competitors in other states flourish? Pritzker tried to push back, his voice rising slightly. It's easy to criticize without offering solutions. Karoline didn't blink. I've offered them. You just don't like them because they demand accountability, something your administration has lacked since day one. There it was, the word that hit harder than any statistic, accountability. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice just enough to make the audience lean in. Governor, you have one job, to protect and serve the people of Illinois. If you can't do that without excuses, then it's time for someone else to try. The people are done with speeches. They want results. The camera caught Pritzker again, his grin still there, but unable to hide a flicker of frustration. The damage was done, the room's energy had shifted. You can call me spoiled all you want, she added, nodding to his earlier remark, but I'm not here to protect my ego. I'm here to protect the people you failed. The moderator's gaze bounced between them, knowing the debate had gone far beyond prepared talking points. The studio no longer felt like a policy discussion. It felt like a courtroom, with the public acting as a jury. Why now? The tension had boiled over. Pritzker's tone carried that defensive-edge politicians get when they know they've lost control of the narrative but can't admit it. You keep painting this picture of Illinois as if it's falling apart, Pritzker said, hands moving in broad gestures. But you ignore the investments we've made in infrastructure, education, and green energy. Karoline raised a hand slightly, not to interrupt rudely, but with the precision of someone preparing a direct strike. Governor, investments aren't the same as results. You can pour billions into a system, but if crime is rising, taxes are crushing families, and jobs are leaving, that money isn't solving the problem, it's feeding it. There was a subtle shift in the audience, with people nodding and glancing at each other as if to say, "She's right." Pritzker tried again. "Look, Miss Leavitt, I understand you have your talking points." Talking points. Karoline's eyebrows lifted. "Governor, I don't need talking points to describe reality. The single mother working 2 jobs who still can't pay rent, she's not a talking point. The small business owner forced to close after 20 years because of your tax hikes is not a talking point. These are real people paying the price for failed leadership." The moderator shifted uneasily in his seat. This was no longer polite exchange. It was a public dismantling. Pritzker leaned on empathy, the familiar political reset. "I cared deeply about the people of Illinois." Karoline's tone stayed calm but cut sharply. "If you cared, you'd listen instead of lecture. You'd admit where you failed instead of hiding behind slogans. And you'd stop calling your critics spoiled when they speak the truth." The line hit hard. Pritzker's forced smile flickered for just a second. She leaned in slightly, her voice firm but charged. "Governor, you call me Trump's spoiled spokesgirl. Fine. But while you're busy thinking up nicknames, I'm thinking up solutions. And here's one for you. Start leading, or step aside for someone who will." A low rumble of applause broke out, unscripted, genuine. The camera caught Pritzker blinking, weighing whether to fight back harder or cut his losses, but everyone in the room, and watching at home, could see it. Karoline had taken control. Pritzker straightened, clearly trying to recover. "Karoline, you're good at sound bites," he said with faint smirk. "But governing isn't about throwing punches on TV. It's about building consensus and making tough calls that not everyone will like." Karoline almost smiled. He had just given her the opening she wanted. "Governor, consensus is fine when the house isn't on fire. But when families are being priced out, when crime makes neighborhoods unsafe, and when businesses are leaving your state, you don't form a committee, you act." Pritzker's eyes narrowed, and the moderator stepped in. "Let's keep this on solutions." "Governor, you proposed—" "Hold on," Karoline interjected, her voice calm but resolute. "Before we talk solutions, we need to talk accountability, because you can't fix a problem you won't acknowledge." The audience went still. You could hear the studio lights buzzing. "You called me Trump's spoiled spokesgirl. Cute line. But here's the truth. I've earned everything I have. I didn't inherit a political machine. I didn't have billionaire family ties. I started as a small-town girl from New Hampshire and earned my place through hard work, persistence, and showing up every single day. And maybe that's why I see what you can't, because I've lived in the real world you keep ignoring. That line hit hard. Even the moderator leaned back, as if realizing they'd crossed into territory that couldn't be smoothed over. Pritzker opened his mouth to respond, but Karoline kept going, her voice tight and controlled. Governor, you've had years to prove your leadership. And what do we have? Higher taxes, higher crime, lower trust, people leaving Illinois in record numbers. That's not a partisan line, that's census data. Facts don't care about your slogans. This time, the applause was louder and longer. The moderator tried to move on, but Karoline wasn't done. And here's the kicker. Governor, she said, leaning in, locking eyes with him. If you spent half as much time fixing your state as you do thinking up insult for people like me, Illinois might actually be somewhere people want to stay. The applause exploded. The camera cut to Pritzker, jaw tight, struggling to smile that IT didn't work. The optics were brutal. Karoline had dismantled his credibility in real time, and everyone knew it. For a few seconds, the governor stayed silent. Pritzker weighed whether to respond or move on. In the end, he muttered, "We'll let the voters decide," and glanced down at his notes. But the damage was done. Karoline hadn't just won the exchange. She had taken control of it. The moderator checked the clock, signaling the debate was almost over. "We have time for closing statements," he said, turning first to Governor Pritzker. Pritzker leaned into the microphone, his tone slower and more deliberate. "Illinois is on a path toward progress," he began. "It's not perfect, but we've invested in our communities, stood up for working families, and defended democratic values against extremism. My opponent represents politics that divide rather than solve problems." It was a safe, polished ending, clearly aimed at avoiding another confrontation. Then it was Karoline's turn. She didn't glance at her notes. She didn't need to. Stepping slightly forward, she looked straight into the camera, speaking to both the audience in the room and those at home. "Governor Pritzker says Illinois is on a path toward progress. But let's be honest, the only progress most people see is their bills rising, their safety declining, and their neighbors loading moving trucks." A quiet mix of laughter and agreement rippled through the audience. "He says I bring division. What I bring is a wake-up call. Because unity without accountability is nothing more than a photo op, and Illinois doesn't need more photo ops. It needs real results." She paused, letting her words settle. "I grew up where people don't ask much of their leaders. They just want honesty, someone to fight for them, and to follow through on promises. If that's considered spoiled, then fine. But I won't apologize for expecting better. I won't apologize for calling out failure when it happens. And I won't apologize for standing up to anyone, whether it's the media, the political establishment, or even a governor with endless resources and a team of advisors." The camera cut to Pritzker, his polite smile beginning to strain. "Governor," she said, turning directly toward him, "you can call me names all day, but at the end of the day, people watching tonight know the truth. You've had your chance. And Illinois can't afford 4 more years of excuses." That line drew the loudest applause of the night. Echoing through the room, Karoline faced the audience again, her voice steady but firm. "This isn't about red or blue. It's about right and wrong. And if you're tired of watching politicians get richer while your state gets poorer, then it's time to stop rewarding failure and start demanding results. You deserve better, and you know it." The moderator thanked both candidates, but the applause continued as the cameras began to fade. Pritzker gave a stiff nod, while Karoline's faint smile carried a clear message. She knew she delivered the knockout blow. Tonight wasn't just about winning a debate. It was about speaking the truth. And the truth is Illinois is at a breaking point. You've been told things are improving, but in your gut, you know they're not. Your streets aren't safer. Your wallets aren't fuller. And your leaders aren't listening. Governor Pritzker can throw every label he wants at me, but I'm not here to earn his approval. I'm here to earn yours. Because you deserve leaders who fight for you, not for themselves. Leaders who measure success by the lives they improve, not the headlines they create. If you're tired of excuses, tired of stage photos, tired of politicians protecting their image instead of your future, this is your moment. Stand with me. Let's demand better. Let's take our state back. Together, I'm Karoline Leavitt, and I will never stop fighting for you.